In the fall of 2011, I was riding my bicycle to work like I'd done many, many times. Is that better? Okay. So I was riding my bicycle to work like I had done many times. And as I rounded the corner at the Harriman High School, I knew that something wasn't quite right. And I blacked out. And when I came to, my bike had hit the curb and I was laying in the grass. I came to and was still riding the bike, and then the bike hit the curb. And as I hit the grass, I had passed out and I was totally unconscious. Well, a man taking his 14-year-old boy to school noticed me laying in the grass, and he circled around to help me to see if I needed help. And when he discovered that I was unconscious, the only thing he could think to do would be to call 911. So the simple act of him holding his cell phone up to his ear and leaning over me caught the attention of two other men that were on their way to work that also circled around and came back to help me and to assist the first guy. Later on, I talked to all of them. The first guy happened to be the first gentleman who didn't know what to do, told me that he didn't know CPR, and all he could think to do was to call 911. The second guy that showed up just happened to be the paramedic on the Salt Lake City SWAT team. The third guy that showed up just happened to be the battalion chief on the Sandy City Fire Department. Who would have guessed, huh? The doctors later told me that I had suffered a ventricular tachycardia. And this was the beginning of my journey with heart failure. The ambulance took me away and took me to a cardiac facility that was not in the IHC network. And they started to perform the standard treatment of medication. Eventually it was implanted a pacemaker defibrillator. And eventually ended up with a butamine pump, which distributed medication into my bloodstream to cause the heart to work a little harder. Well, to fast forward a little bit to now 2014 and 2015, I was experiencing heart attacks at a regular increased frequency. On one occasion, the ambulance driver decided to bring me here to IMC at the ER. And the heart failure clinic then became my medical provider, and what a difference that made. After each heart attack, I requested that once I was stable, I wanted to be released and go home. And after being released from the hospital on one occasion, I returned home only to return back to the hospital 2 hours later, having suffered another heart attack. And at that time, I always felt that I was in denial, that this couldn't be happening to me. After all, I was always very active. And then Dr. Kafori and several of his associates stood at the foot of my bed and informed me of the seriousness of my condition and presented to me two options. The first option, I would be released into hospice care and I would be made comfortable until the end. This wasn't so unattractive at the time. Option two, due to the condition of my heart, my heart would be surgically removed and replaced with a total mechanical heart. And I would be tethered to a large machine that they called Big Blue. And this would be a bridge to transplant. My journey, and by the way, I lived in the hospital for 8 months waiting for that transplant. My journey to transplant was not without its challenges. 4 days after they implanted the mechanical heart, my aorta tore, and which brought on a lot of other complications. With just a 6% chance of survival, I realized how fragile life can be. But the staff of the doctors and the hospital staff were so knowledgeable. They took each complication, addressed it, and solved it. I soon turned the point and turned the corner and started to regain my strength. And as I became stronger, the hospital staff came to me and recommended or started to talk to me about a new device called a Freedom Driver, and it would replace this big machine that I was tethered to. It was about the size of a large football and would give me a great deal of mobility. But they explained that there'd be a certain level of risk involved in that it had never been used out here before. Everyone would be on a learning curve. There was weeks of training of the staff. There were procedures and policies that were established, and there were some complications that we had to overcome during that time. But as we did so, I became much more mobile and much stronger. I could travel the hallways of the hospital. I could get into restricted areas and where I was escorted out. At one point on a summer's day, it was nice and warm, and I was standing out on the curb across the street staring at Costco's. And I was wondering if anyone would notice if one of the shoppers was wearing a hospital gown. At that point, Dr. Reed pulled up in his car and rolled down his window and said, "Don't even think about it." But after 8 months, a good friend and nurse of mine came into my room and announced that he had just received orders to prep me for surgery. And during the early hours of October 25th, 2015, I received my donor's heart. There were many miracles performed during the 8 months that I was here. But as I look back, it took an army of people to get me here, as many of you. I am very grateful for the Good Samaritans, for the doctors and clinicians, nurses, hospital staff, my caregiving wife and family, and my fellow support patients through the support group, and the many donors and donor families that extend the lives of so many others. Thank you.